On the morning a spring storm tugged the faded banner off Marla's Deli on Broad Street, he decided to leave Columbus. The banner skated down the sidewalk like a kite that had lost its nerve, and he stood in the doorway of his apartment with a coffee he had reheated twice, watching it drift. The coffee tasted a little like cardboard. The morning tasted like change. He had been working at a small print shop, the kind that makes wedding invitations, school flyers, and paper menus for places that have lived longer than their chairs. The job was fine, and that was the problem. Finance started to feel like a sweater that itched in quiet places. So he said out loud, to no one in particular, "It's time." And the words surprised him with their steady sound. A week earlier, he had seen a posting for a job at a makerspace in Austin, Texas, helping people cut wood, print signs, and repair half-broken ideas. It sounded like a workshop where people entered with a shrug and left with a grin. He clicked the listing and then closed it twice. Now, with the banner sliding along the curb and the radio in someone's car playing a hopeful song, he opened it again and wrote his application between sips. He told his landlord first. "Mr. Patel nodded slowly and said, "Take the plant if you want. It's been looking at the sun wrong way." The plant was a leaning snake plant that lived by the mailboxes like a bored doorman. He told his neighbor, Ms. Lopez, who handed him a sticky note with 3 Austin taco trucks written in neat, proud handwriting. "I have friends there," she said. "People with good salsa and good advice." He told his friend Dan over a slice of pepperoni and a game on TV. Dan said, "You? Texas? You'll need a hat." They laughed, but neither of them were joking. He sold the couch to a grad student who arrived in a dented sedan and declared the cushions ambitious. He let the bike go for a price that was almost fair. He wrapped plates in old newspapers that turned his fingers gray, and he found a postcard from a family vacation to Cedar Point that made him smile at his 14-year-old haircut. His mother called from Dayton and said, "Send me the address the second you have it. I'm going to label it New Chapter, and then I'm going to worry in an organized way." He loved her for that. Packing made him honest. He kept the tools and the coffee mugs with chips because they felt like they had survived something. He tossed the shirts he never wore and the cables that braided themselves into stress. There was a pile for the thrift store, a pile for Dan, a pile that meant nothing and took too long to decide about. He ate cereal for dinner 2 nights in a row and described it to himself as minimalist. In the quiet of the last evening, he walked the familiar blocks. The bakery sign hummed. A bus sighed and kneeled to let a passenger off. The deli window was empty now, a rectangle that showed everything inside with a kind of formal honesty. He liked that, a space that didn't pretend. The makerspace called him on a Wednesday with an offer. The voice on the line was cheerful and practical. "If you can be here in 10 days, we're yours. The summer schedule gets busy. People want to build when the days are long." He said yes and felt his mouth do an unfamiliar thing. It smiled before he could tell it to. He bought a second-hand trailer and a stack of bungee cords that looked brave but untested. He labeled boxes with short sentences: kitchen, hopeful, books, the good ones, bathroom, obviously. He rolled the snake plant to the curb and then turned it around, because he didn't need to make enemies in the plant world. On the morning he left, Columbus looked bright in that way cities do when you're about to miss them. He shook hands with Mr. Patel and hugged Ms. Lopez, who placed a small, mysterious jar in his palm. "Salsa," she said. "For your first night there? A taste of a place that doesn't know you yet." He tightened the straps, checked the lights, and taped the deli's fallen banner to the inside wall of the trailer because it felt like a good luck curtain. When he pulled from the curb, the rear view held the street in a frame no bigger than a hand. It made the familiar look gentle. He turned onto the highway and merged with a line of cars that didn't know his story and didn't need to. The snake plant leaned toward the passenger window like it had a map. He set the cruise control, tapped the steering wheel, and said, "Austin," as if the word itself might lay down a path. The rain that had taken the banner drifted north, and the sky ahead seemed clean and open, the color of paper ready for ink. He told himself he would stop wherever the trip surprised him. He would say yes to small detours, to pie, to the kind of music that makes strangers look at each other and nod. He would keep receipts only if they were funny. If he missed an exit, he would call it research. If he felt afraid, he would let the fear ride shotgun until it got bored and asked to be dropped off. Somewhere near Dayton, the radio found a station that played songs with hunger in the choruses. He sang along with a voice that was good enough for a moving truck. A green sign promised gas, restrooms, and coffee. Another sign promised only fireworks, which made him laugh and keep driving. The border to Kentucky arrived with a bridge that pulled the river under the truck like a ribbon. He crossed it and felt, for the first time on that long road, the bright, quiet click of beginning. He did not know the exact streets he would live on or how the Texas light would feel on his arms in the late afternoon. He did not know which drawer the Forks would choose or which corner of the new apartment would become the place where he put everything he forgot. But he knew the maker of the road and the song of the tires, and he knew the particular courage of showing up somewhere with more questions than furniture. The banner rustled against the trailer wall. The plant leaned, listening. The miles made room. He found a diner in Louisville with a sign shaped like a slice of pie, and the waitress called him Han, a word that landed like a blanket over cold knees. The coffee was strong and tasted like second chances. He bought a keychain from the rack by the register, a tiny horse he didn't need but wanted. Back on the road, he waved at a toddler in the next lane who waved back like he'd been training for that exact moment. The truck hummed. The day unfolded like something practiced but still sincere. He headed south, and the map, for once, felt like permission rather than a list. The second day began with Tennessee hills that looked like someone had ironed them too gently. He kept the windows cracked to let in the smell of damp leaves and the sweet shock of cut grass. In the truck bed, the banner flapped a little, offering a slow applause each time the road opened wide. Nashville announced itself with a guitar on a billboard, and he remembered a roommate who had come here with a suitcase full of songs and a plan printed on a napkin. He drove on, not because he wasn't curious, but because the day was a ribbon and he was learning to pull. In a town east of Memphis, a man in a sun-faded cap flagged him down in a grocery parking lot and said, "You heading west? Mind if I trade you a cold soda for 5 minutes of jumper cables?" He helped, and they talked about weather and the subtle art of keeping a truck alive past its natural hopes. The man handed him a paperback book with the cover nearly gone. "Roadside Saints," he said, "for luck." He didn't ask what that meant. He tucked the book into the glove box and felt, oddly, safer. The air conditioner coughed in the afternoon heat, then settled into a tired whisper. He pulled into a rest area and checked fuses with the patient seriousness of someone asking an old dog how it feels. A loose connection clicked back into place, and the air returned with relief that raised goosebumps. He celebrated with a handful of pretzels and a phone call to his mother. She asked if he was eating vegetables. He told her about the salsa and pretended tomatoes counted like a doctor might. Near the Arkansas border, he stopped at a travel center that could have hosted a small town. Inside, there were rows of jerky, shelves of candles that smelled like sunrise porch, and a wall of coolers that hummed like a choir. He bought a sandwich and stood outside watching a family take turns posing with a metal statue of a beaver. The father saluted the statue with the seriousness of a general. Everyone laughed, and it surprised him that laughter could make him feel less alone even when it wasn't meant for him. He slept that night in a motel where the ice machine thumped like a polite drummer. The clerk gave him a room key attached to a blue tag and a gentle list of nearby places for breakfast that all served biscuits with opinions. He set the snake plant on the windowsill, and in the weak light the plant seemed to steady, as if it recognized the temporary nature of everything and approved. He ate a granola bar and read 3 pages of the book from the man with the jumper cables. The book was about people who stop on the side of the road to help and the small economies of kindness we keep without receipts. He slept deeply, with the kind of rest that comes after moving yourself further than you thought you could. Morning brought a sky that looked recently washed. He mailed a postcard to Ms. Lopez with a drawing of a guitar and wrote, "I promised to try every taco you listed, but not at once." He mailed another to Dan that read, "Hat status, pending." He mailed a third to himself at a post office box he had set up online, because he liked the idea of writing to the future. The long stretch through Texas felt like a lesson in both size and patience. The horizon leaned away and then leaned away again. He learned the rhythm of small towns, a feed store, a church, a place to fix the things that make noise, and a park where someone always walks in circles. At a gas station outside of Tyler, an older couple traveling to see their grandkids told him to try the kolaches from the bakery next door. He did, and they tasted like pastries that had understood their responsibilities early in life. He left a review in his head and then laughed at himself for it. When the sun went all brass and low, he pulled into a picnic area and watched a lightning storm far off, flickering like a secret conversation. The banner whispered behind him. He ate chips with Ms. Lopez's salsa, which came alive in the heat, and he realized this was the first dinner of the move that felt like a small ceremony. He said thank you, though he wasn't sure to whom. Maybe to the miles for allowing him to pass. Maybe to the old city for letting him go with kindness. Maybe to the version of himself who had pressed send on the job application. By the time the lights of Austin appeared, he had already decided the first thing he would hang on the wall would be the fallen deli banner, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that even useful things can slip loose and still find a place. He drove past a mural washed in late light, past people laughing at metal tables, past a man jogging with a dog that looked like a happy cloud. The streets had names he did not know yet, and that felt like opportunity rather than confusion. The plant leaned toward the window, and the city let him in. The studio in East Austin was small in the honest way that studios are small. The window framed a pecan tree and a sliver of sky that made cloud watching a reasonable hobby. The landlord, a woman named Kendra with keys like a brass bouquet, handed him the door code and said, "Welcome. The water gets hot fast. Don't be brave." He laughed, then tucked the advice away like a coupon he would definitely use. He carried boxes up the stairs, promising his knees a better tomorrow. The couch, lighter now that it belonged to someone else, was not his problem. The banner became a curtain. The snake plant took the corner by the window and seemed to breathe out. The makerspace smelled like pine shavings, warm plastic, and coffee. His first morning, a teenager came in with a wobbly stool and a grin that said, "I made this," and he knew he was in the right place. He organized drill bits by size, swept up the sweet-smelling mess that comes after good work, and labeled a shelf screws that secretly want to be bolts. People laughed in a friendly way and then borrowed the right screwdriver. A retired math teacher showed him how to square a frame by listening to it, as if lumber had a song. A woman building a sign for her food truck taught him to say y'all, without sounding like he was auditioning. Afternoons were hot and loud with cicadas. Their buzz like a soft warning to drink more water. He bought a fan and aimed it at his ambition. He learned the cross streets by getting them wrong and then getting them right. He tried 3 taco trucks from Ms. Lopez's list. One offered tortillas so fresh they seemed to apologize for every stale tortilla he had ever met. Another served grilled fish with cabbage that snapped like a friendly handshake. The third handed him green salsa and told him, "Careful," in a voice that somehow made him braver. He met his neighbor, Jamal, in the stairwell when a box split at the bottom and his pot's lid clanged down each step like a silver parade. Jamal caught one and said, "Welcome," as if he'd been practicing the word all week. They set the kitchen straight and ate kolaches on the floor. Jamal told stories about the city's hidden corners. The park that smelled like rain after the sprinklers, the bookstore with a cat that judged only poets, the coffee truck where the barista drew tiny boats in the foam on Thursdays. They made a plan to check each place off like a scavenger hunt designed by kind people. The small problems arrived on schedule. A faucet that refused to relax, a drawer that stuck like an old opinion, a bike lock that forgot the combination at the worst moment. He solved them with patience and trips to a hardware store where the clerks wore aprons and soft expressions, like therapists for screws. He bought a hat, not because Dan insisted from miles away, but because the sun had made its case. It was the color of sand and made strangers nod like he had joined a club. On a Friday evening, he carried a workbench up the stairs, and halfway up it rested and refused to go further. He stood there, sweaty and smiling in disbelief. Jamal appeared, then a woman from downstairs, then a man who introduced himself as, "I'm Greg with the drill." Together, they canted the bench at an angle that defied the elevator and reason, and the thing slid into the studio like a ship into harbor. He opened a jar of pickles he had bought for no specific reason and passed them around like a medal ceremony. Someone suggested tacos, and no one said no. He kept a small ritual. Each night, he wrote one line in a notebook, a small proof that the day had matters worth remembering. Taught a kid to sand with the grain. Found a cool breeze in the shade of a mural. Salsa tasted like possibility. He underlined nothing and meant everything. His mother called on Sundays. She asked if he was sleeping, if he was eating, if people were kind. He told her the truth, which was yes and mostly yes. She told him the mailman in Dayton had asked after him, which felt like evidence that we all live in more hearts than we know. He rode his bike around Lady Bird Lake at dusk, the water silvering under a sky that was learning the trick of evening. Runners passed, dogs inspected the world with important noses, and a family posed for a photo with the city stacked soft behind them. He stopped on the bridge and watched the bats pour out like ink, thinking nature had a flair for exits. The hat kept his head cool. The city kept his attention. One night, a brief rain arrived hungry and quick. It tapped the window and sent the air toward mercy. He opened the glass and let the sting of petrichor come in. The banner curtain breathed and settled. The plant did a slow dance that could have been imagination or contentment. He lay back on the floor and told himself a simple fact he had been circling. He had not started over. He had started further. The person who had packed the boxes was here too, but less afraid. Weeks turned, and the studio found its grooves. The drawer learned to slide. The faucet sighed and behaved. He built a narrow shelf next to the door for keys and the small things that a day asks you to carry. The makerspace calendar filled with classes, fix your wobbly chair, letters that like the rain, beginner's jigsaw. He taught one, a tiny workshop about hanging things straight. People came with frames and hopes. He told them the trick. Measure, breathe, trust your level, and accept that a house that leans a little can still be a good home. They laughed, then tried, then succeeded. He felt useful in a way that warmed him from the inside. On a Sunday morning, Jamal knocked with 2 coffees and said there was a porch concert 3 blocks over, a small band that played songs about weekly joys, fresh peaches, folded laundry, late buses that finally come, and the relief of an honest, "I'm sorry." They stood in the shade and listened, the air soft, the neighbors swaying like grass with opinions. He thought, not for the first time, that he had found a street where he could age with dignity and humor. He hung the fallen deli banner above the workbench. Sometimes it rustled, and sometimes it rested, and either way it looked at home. He sent Ms. Lopez a photo of the tacos he liked best, with a caption that simply read, "Correct choice." He mailed Dan a hat shaped like a joke and a thank you shaped like a sentence. He mailed his mother a postcard that showed the river and the city smiling at each other. On the back he wrote, "The Forks chose the third drawer. I think they're onto something." At dusk, he would sometimes stand by the window and watch the light linger in the pecan leaves. The days felt full without being heavy. His map, once a list, had become a habit, left at the mural, right at the cafe, straight past the house where the wind chimes sang. He knew the best time to cross the busy street, and the name of the dog who guarded the bookstore cat from too much praise. He had friends who could lift a workbench and neighbors who could lift a mood. He had come for a job, but what he had found was a life that made room for the clean edges of work and the soft edges of rest. He had found a city that greeted him in small, daily ways. He had found, tucked inside the motion of leaving, the surprising grace of arriving. On the last night before the heat decided to be kind again, he opened the notebook and wrote, "Today I remembered that home is not a prize you win. It's a habit you practice." Then he turned off the light, and the banner settled, and the plant leaned toward the moon, and the new place, steady and ordinary and good, kept breathing around him.